Kevin Stefanski's abrupt firing wasn't just a coaching change, it was a message. A message that Cleveland is done waiting. For years, the Browns cycled through quarterbacks, strategies, and philosophies, clinging to statistical optimism without consistent results. Now with Stefanski gone and Paul DePodesta exiting, the era of data-driven decisions appears to be over. What replaces it is something far more centralized, the rise of Andrew Berry. His elevation to team president isn't symbolic. It's a transfer of total control, especially with the future of...
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Shedeur, Sanders hanging in the balance. Cleveland's leadership didn't just remove Stefanski. They handed Berry the entire playbook. This isn't about incremental fixes anymore. If Shedeur Sanders is a long-term answer, then Berry is now responsible for building the question. From overhauling the coaching staff to reshaping the roster, Berry's fingerprints will be on everything. And with 2026 pegged as Sanders' breakout year, this move marks the beginning of a 2-year sprint to build a quarterback-centered identity fully aligned with Berry's strategic vision. Kevin Stefanski is out. Andrew Berry just got a massive promotion. And Shedeur Sanders? He's right in the middle of all of it. Welcome to Cleveland, where front office shakeups aren't just common, they're practically tradition. But this time it feels different. Stefanski's firing wasn't just a typical mid-season overreaction. It was a full-on organizational pivot. A reshuffling of the deck that puts GM Andrew Berry directly under owner Jimmy Haslam, now as team president. That's not a small title bump. That's a promotion with teeth. And the implications? They're massive. So, what exactly is going on in Cleveland? Let's break it down. First, Kevin Stefanski, head coach since 2020, is suddenly shown the door. The timing may seem abrupt, but for insiders, this kind of move was a long time coming. While Stefanski brought some much-needed structure during his tenure, the Browns have remained inconsistent, especially at the quarterback position. And with a roster that's been stuck in win-now mode, ownership clearly decided it was time for a new vision, a centralized one, which brings us to Andrew Berry. Berry has been GM since 2020, and despite a mixed track record, he now holds more power than ever. His promotion to team president signals one thing. The Haslams trust his vision for the franchise more than anyone else's. He's no longer just picking players. He's shaping the entire organization. Coaching staff, roster, culture, everything. And if there's one quarterback Berry has shown persistent interest in, it's Shedeur Sanders. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we dive into what this means for Sanders, we need to talk about another major exit, Paul DePodesta. If you don't know the name, DePodesta was the Browns' chief strategy officer, the guy brought in from the world of baseball analytics to modernize the franchise. He was instrumental in big decisions like the Deshaun Watson trade, and his influence leaned heavily into data-driven management. But now DePodesta's out, leaving for the Colorado Rockies. Of all places, his departure might seem random, but in context, it's anything but. It clears the path for Berry to fully implement his football philosophy. No more power struggles between analytics and traditional scouting. No more layered bureaucracy. Just Berry, directly under the owner, with a clear runway. And let's be clear, Berry's promotion doesn't just give him power. It gives him time. Time to build the roster he wants. Time to find the right coaching staff. And most importantly, time to develop the kind of quarterback who could anchor the franchise for years. Shedeur Sanders. The timeline is lining up in a way that's hard to ignore. Sanders isn't expected to start immediately in the NFL, but 2026? That's the year everyone's eyeing. That's when he's projected to be ready. And that just so happens to sync up perfectly with Cleveland's new organizational structure. With Berry now at the top, every major decision from now until then could be made with one goal in mind. Set the stage for Shedeur. Build a roster tailored to his skill set. Hire coaches who can actually develop a young quarterback. Create a stable, supportive environment. Something Cleveland has failed at repeatedly. And that's what makes this shakeup so interesting. It's not just a change in leadership. It's a full reset. A declaration that the old way didn't work. And it's time to commit to something long-term, something with a plan. Because let's be honest, quarterback's ability has been Cleveland's white whale. From draft busts to injury-plagued veterans to controversial trades, nothing has stuck, and fans are tired. Ownership knows that. So now, all chips are on the table. And if Barry believes Shedeur is the answer, the organization will move accordingly. Coaching is the next domino. With Stefanski gone, the question becomes, who's coming in? All signs point to someone offensive-minded. Someone who can nurture a young quarterback and build a system around his strengths. This isn't just about hiring a new coach. It's about finding the right coach to match the new era. And when you combine that with a roster already being reshaped for the future, the message becomes clear. This is now Barry's team. And if you're not aligned with his vision, you're out. Of course, there's plenty of skepticism. Barry's past decisions haven't all been hits. Some of his roster construction has been heavily criticized. The Watson trade is still a sore spot, and there are lingering questions about whether he's truly the right guy to lead such a massive rebuild, too. But ownership clearly believes he is. This promotion isn't just a nod of approval. It's a full endorsement, a signal that whatever happens next, it'll be Barry's legacy, and by extension, Shedeur's opportunity. The strategy here isn't subtle. The Browns want to stop treading water. They want to build something real. Sustainable, and they're betting that Barry, with a clean slate and full authority, can finally get them there. Let's not forget, this isn't just about Cleveland. Across the league, we're seeing similar moves. Franchises willing to blow things up, reshuffle their leadership, and build around promising quarterbacks. It's the NFL's version of a hard reset, and Cleveland's finally joining that trend. With the 2026 season circled in red, everything between now and then becomes preparation. Coaching hires, draft picks, free agency. All of it will be tailored to create the ideal situation for a young quarterback to succeed. It's not about chasing instant results anymore. It's about building a foundation. And while nothing's guaranteed in the NFL, this is the first time in a long time that Cleveland seems to be playing the long game. So what does this mean for Sanders? It means he might just land in a situation where the front office, the coaching staff, and the roster are actually aligned, for once, where the chaos of Cleveland gives way to some structure, some patience, some vision, and that can make all the difference. Because if Barry's plan works, we're talking about a complete culture shift, a Browns team with a stable quarterback, a clear offensive identity, and leadership that isn't changing every other season. For fans, it might feel like déjà vu, another rebuild, another front office promise. But the stakes are different now. The control is centralized. The timeline is defined. And the quarterback of the future? He's already on the radar. So yeah, Kevin Stefanski is gone. Paul DePodesta's on to baseball. And Andrew Barry? He's not just surviving, he's running the show. The Browns are banking on him to be the architect of their next era. And if everything goes according to plan, 2026 could be the year it all comes together. Or, of course, it could implode. But at least this time, there's a plan. Let us know what you think. Is this the move that finally sets Cleveland on the right track? Or just another chapter in the Browns' never-ending reboot? Drop your thoughts in the comments, like if you're as confused as we are. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the drama behind the headlines. The thing about Cleveland is when they blow it up, they really blow it up. We're not talking minor tweaks or some let's just retool and run it back type of energy. No, this is the Browns flipping the entire organization on its head. Firing the coach, promoting the GM to president, and clearing out a high-ranking executive who's been steering strategy for years. That's not housekeeping. That's setting fire to the blueprint and building a whole new one from scratch. And the timing? Not random. The Shedeur-Sanders timeline is driving this more than people realize. Because whether he ends up in Cleveland or not, the Browns are positioning themselves to be a prime landing spot for a young quarterback. And with Barry now fully in charge, there's no confusion about who's steering the ship. That matters. Before this, power in Cleveland was split. You had Stefanski with some say, DePodesta pushing the analytics agenda, and Barry trying to balance both. Now, the hierarchy is simple. Barry's at the top. He answers only to Haslam. And that means every decision going forward is filtered through his football lens. That's a big deal, because one of the biggest criticisms of the Browns over the last few years has been the lack of a singular identity. They've had talent. They've had moments. But they haven't had direction. Now, that excuse is gone. And we can't gloss over the fact that the Podesta leaving is symbolic. He was brought in as the guy who'd modernize the team. He represented the shift toward data, analytics, algorithm-driven roster moves. But 4 years post-Watson trade and an underwhelming playoff resume later, that philosophy clearly didn't deliver what it promised. The Browns aren't ditching analytics entirely, but they are ditching the idea that it should override football instinct. That's what Barry represents now. He's not some old-school gut-feeling GM, but he's definitely more balanced. He blends scouting with analytics. That hybrid mindset is what ownership is betting on. And here's the subtle part people might miss. Barry's background isn't just front office. He started in scouting. He's got a football foundation. So now, as team president, you've got a guy who knows talent evaluation firsthand and now has the authority to shape everything, from roster construction to who's standing on the sideline with a headset. So let's talk about that sideline. Kevin Stefanski was never a disaster, but he was never quite the guy either. That 2020 Coach of the Year award feels like a lifetime ago. Since then, the offense stalled, the quarterback situation spiraled, and the locker room, yeah, let's just say it wasn't exactly thriving. This isn't scapegoating, it's reality. When your head coach doesn't elevate your team, and the locker room doesn't rally around him, the writing's on the wall. Now, with Barry in charge, the Browns can hire someone who fits the new direction. And that means offense, development, energy. Think less CEO-type head coach, and more quarterback whisperer who can install a real system. And it has to be someone who can bring the best out of whoever ends up under center. If it's Shedeur, great. But even if it's not, the template is the same. Develop a young quarterback and finally give this fan base something it hasn't had in years. Hope tied to actual growth, not hype. That's why this isn't just about Barry and his promotion. It's about building the entire infrastructure to finally get quarterback development right. Because that's where everything starts. No matter how talented the defense is or how good the O-line is. If your QB situation is a revolving door, you're going nowhere. Cleveland knows this better than anyone. Let's not forget, since 1999, the Browns have started more quarterbacks than some franchises have had in their entire history. It's a running joke at this point. A punchline. And if you think ownership isn't tired of that narrative, think again. So if Shedeur Sanders is even remotely in play, you better believe they're going to build around him with intention. That means hiring a coach and OC that speaks his language. That means offensive schemes that don't try to force a square peg into a round hole. That means making sure the locker room, the media market, the city, everything, is aligned around patience and development, not chaos and short-term panic. Because if you burn another young quarterback in Cleveland, there might not be another chance. And that's part of what makes this reset feel so significant. They're not just preparing for the next guy. They're preparing for the last chance to get it right before the entire model collapses again. Now, let's be real. A promotion doesn't automatically mean success. Andrew Barry still has to prove he can lead an organization at this level. And yes, critics will point to the Deshaun Watson deal as a massive misfire. That trade not only gutted the Browns of assets, but also tethered the team to a contract that's been a financial and PR nightmare. But here's what's different now. Barry is no longer boxed in by that mistake. With the Podesta gone and Stefanski out, the leash has been reset. The team can build around a new quarterback. The Watson era, as awkward as it still is winding down. And 2026? That's the soft deadline. That's when the Browns either have a fully developed Sanders or someone else leading a roster that's been 2 years in the making. It's a full organizational pivot, one that reflects a wider trend across the league. Teams are done waiting around. They're blowing things up and rebuilding faster. The days of giving coaches 5 years to figure out are over. You either show progress quickly or you're gone. And Cleveland, desperate for relevance, desperate for anything resembling consistency, has finally joined the party. They're doing what other franchises have already done. And they're betting big on one man to make it all work. Barry isn't just a GM anymore. He's the vision. He's the plan. He's the voice. And for Shedeur Sanders, that's the best case scenario. Because when leadership is aligned and timelines are set, a young quarterback can actually thrive. Not be rushed. Not be tossed into a broken system. But grown. Coached. Protected. That's what Cleveland needs. That's what Barry now has the power to deliver. But it's going to require a lot of smart decisions, quickly. From who replaces Stefanski to how they use their draft picks. From how they manage the Watson situation to what kind of culture they build in the locker room. Every move will be scrutinized. Every slip will be magnified. This is not just a reset. It's a referendum. And the NFL is watching. Because if Cleveland finally breaks the cycle, if they finally pull off a strategic, long-term rebuild around a young quarterback, it changes everything. Not just for the team, but for the league. It proves that even the most dysfunctional franchises can course correct. But if they blow it, then it's just another chapter in the Browns' long, painful novel of almosts. Let's be honest, nobody expected the Browns to make this many seismic moves as quickly. The usual pace in Cleveland is slow motion with a touch of dysfunction. But this is acceleration mode. And whether it's desperation or design, it's happening now, fast and unapologetically. Andrew Barry didn't just walk into more responsibility. He inherited the entire direction of the franchise. One wrong hire? It's on him. Another quarterback bust? That's his legacy. But if this works, if Sanders becomes a guy and Cleveland finally builds something cohesive, Barry doesn't just keep his job. He goes down as the man who ended the Browns' generational quarterback curse. And let's not downplay how real that curse has been. Since their return to the league in 1999, the Browns have cycled through more QBs than some people have phone chargers. They've drafted wrong, traded wrong, signed wrong. It's been a parade of false starts. You know the names: Tim Couch, Johnny Manziel, Brady Quinn, Colt McCoy, Baker Mayfield. The list is long and mostly painful. So when you hear that Barry might be reshaping the franchise around Shedeur Sanders, your first thought might be, okay, but why would this time be different? It's a fair question. Here's the difference. Structure. Cleveland has almost never had a clean top-down structure. Usually, it's been three people try and pull the franchise in three different directions. Now, it's all Barry. The Haslams made that decision loud and clear. He decides the head coach. He decides the offensive identity. He decides who's developing the next quarterback. That clarity might be Cleveland's most valuable asset right now. Because when everyone in the building is aligned on vision, timeline, and expectations, you avoid the classic Brown spiral. Blame games, backstabbing, power struggles, and yet another reboot. This is the first time in a long time that Cleveland is clearing the runway for a full developmental plan with zero interference. And yes, all signs point to that plan centering around Shedeur Sanders. Is it guaranteed? No, but the pieces are lining up. The projected 2026 start year. The need for a rebuild with a long-term outlook. Barry's previous attention toward quarterback prospects with mobility and arm talent. And let's not ignore how this aligns with what modern successful teams are doing, building around young, coachable quarterbacks with elite upside. Think about how many teams have turned a corner by building around the right quarterback at the right time. The Bills with Josh Allen. The Eagles with Jalen Hurts. The Texans are now doing it with C.J. Stroud. These franchises found their guy and gave him structure, talent, and trust. That's the model. That's what Barry now has the freedom to recreate. But there's risk, massive risk. Because if you make all these moves and you don't get the quarterback right, it sets you back 5 more years. It's not just about Shedeur being talented. It's about whether Cleveland can develop him. And that requires something the Browns have rarely shown: patience. That's why the next coaching hire will be the biggest of Barry's career. Bigger than any draft pick. Bigger than any trade. Because this coach won't just be calling plays. He'll be setting the tone for how this team evolves over the next 3 years. And if Sanders is truly the centerpiece, that coach needs to be someone who understands quarterback growth on a deep level. Not just schematically, but emotionally, mentally, culturally. The NFL isn't just about talent anymore. It's about fit, about vibes, about whether the locker room buys in and the coaching staff understands how to bring out the best in 22-year-olds carrying the weight of a franchise. Sanders needs that environment, and Barry is being handed the keys to create it from scratch. Let's be clear. 2026 is now the unofficial countdown clock. That's the soft launch window for this new vision. Between now and then, everything will be about laying bricks, building the roster, installing the right systems, giving Sanders, or whoever ends up under center, a platform where he isn't just surviving, he's ascending. And yeah, maybe the Browns are finally realizing that success doesn't come from swinging big. It comes from sticking to a plan. For decades, they've tried quick fixes, flashy signings, PR distractions. None of it worked. This feels calculated. Get rid of Stefanski. Cut ties with the Podesta. Put Barry in charge. Start building for the next 2 years. No shortcuts. No panic moves. Just slow, deliberate reconstruction. The fans deserve that. The city deserves that. Because Cleveland's loyalty has never been the problem. The Browns could go 4-13 and still sell out half the stadium in December. What they've been begging for isn't miracles. It's competence, direction, a front office that sticks to something for longer than 18 months. That's what Barry represents now. Not perfection, just alignment. And when you've been in the wilderness for 2 decades, alignment starts to feel like salvation. So yeah, there's a lot riding on this. No one's pretending otherwise. But for the first time in what feels like forever, the Browns aren't just reacting to their problems. They're re-engineering the entire system. And if that leads to Shedeur Sanders stepping onto the field in 2026 as the face of a unified, modern, patient Cleveland Browns, then this chaotic moment, the firings, the exits, the power grabs, might go down not as another meltdown, but as a turning point. The question is, will they stick to it? Let us know what you think. Is Cleveland finally breaking the cycle? Or are we just watching a reboot of the same story with new faces? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if you've ever had secondhand stress from following this franchise. And subscribe if you want to keep up with every wild twist in the NFL's most unpredictable soap opera.